I want to go to London. I want to bring in Gunnar Beck of the AFD. I imagine it's a champagne evening for you tonight. Explain the mood with you and those you've spoken to inside HQ.
Well, I don't like the wild expressions of the unrestrained, so I'm quite sober. Let me try to summarize some of my reactions to the election results as they appear now. Now, it's indisputable that Friedrich Merz has won this election. He's won it clearly, but not decisively. Secondly, I think no party is really popular because all the establishment, or at least no establishment party, is clearly popular. They've all lost except for the CDU, which has gained compared to last time, but which is still far below its results in all previous elections. Then third, I predict that nothing much will change as a result of this election, and I'll come back to that point in a second. Now, we may be in for one or two surprises compared at least to the polls if both the Liberals, or if the Liberals and or the Wagenknecht party actually pass the 5% hurdle. And finally, and fifthly, Merz, although he's won this election, now has the very difficult and unenviable task of doing enough to reverse Germany's economic fortunes with a party, 1/3 of it is still firmly Merkelian, and probably with two coalition partners who are closer to Merkel's CDU than anyone else. So that's my prediction. That's why I think probably not much will change in terms of policies.
If we look at your party, and you stand accused by the mainstream parties of dog whistle politics, that you just create a feeling of hatred. Now, you and I have spoken before, and you've said to me that you feel more aligned to the centre and less to the right of the right-wing party. But there are, elements that you cannot avoid within your party. You see an acceptable face in Alice Weidel, but yet she still talks about, re-migration in very controversial terms. And you have neo-Nazis within the party. You have those on the extreme right. Now, how comfortable are you, and including the likes of having Björn Höcke within the party, who was taken to court for using the term used by the stormtroopers and the Nazis, the Alice for Deutschland, which has now been seen on the streets, hasn't it? A wordplay by supporters saying Alice for Deutschland, using Alice instead of Alice, rather than all, it's Alice. So how comfortable with you of that type of rhetoric within the party?
I think you're slightly distorting and exaggerating it. Let's take the case of Mr. Höcke. He did use a phrase, everything for Germany, that was indeed used during the Nazi period, but it is a stock phrase that's been used by political parties, not only nationalist parties, since the Wilhelmine era. And I remember very vividly that in 1990 it was used by our football coach when he sent the winning team into the World Cup final. So I actually don't quite agree with your characterization of this particular episode in Björn Höcke's speech writing. Now, I think the real problem we have here is that Germany is experiencing an unprecedented economic crisis. And I think it's not going to be reversed with half measures. And at the risk of perhaps my not sounding centrist, but I do think that things have to happen both when it comes to migration. Currently, Germany is paying in excess of round about 110 billion euros every year to look after its migrants since 2010. And secondly, the other area where something has to happen is the climate rescue agenda. It is utter folly that Germany, with a share of about 1.8% of the world's CO2 emissions, is attempting to save the world. And sadly, I think it's an example of a kind of abiding megalomania of setting oneself impossible objectives in the case of German politics. Formerly, the Germans fatally wanted to conquer the world. Nowadays, they want to save the world, and they're telling everyone else what to do. This has to stop.
Your party, the Gunnar, is a party of many contradictions, I'm sure you will agree. And there are those supporters of Alice Weidel who see her as the acceptable face of the party. Some of her strengths has been her versatility, that she's seen by the bourgeoisie conservatives, the looks, think she's respectable, pearl necklaces and blazers, and the way her rhetoric. And yet that face, when we look back at 2017, the email that she sent out, and I'll refer to, I'll quote to you, she said this, talking about Angela Merkel and the party. She said, quote, "The pigs are nothing but marionettes of the Victorian allies of World War II and have the task of keeping the German people down by inducing molecular civil wars in the conurbations. Culturally alien people," she talks about, "flooding Germany." Now, she took this to court. She didn't deny it later, and she hasn't since denied it, but hasn't claimed to have said it before. Now, what is your party? Do you still understand? She stands accused of being a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Well, I think you have a talent for focusing and homing in on the most polemical...
On fears of the party.
Undoubtedly, you've just cited some of the more unfortunate utterances by some of my party colleagues. But let's be honest, every party is an assemblage of several parties, and every parliament or every person is even a parliament of different opinions within oneself. Therefore, most people hold slightly contradictory views, and there are different wings to the party. I think the AfD is not alone in that regard. But yes, of course, there are different opinions within the party. What I can assure you of is that those you've cited at the beginning are, if they exist, firmly in the minority. Let me put something very different hypothesis to you. I think the AfD is in many respects actually becoming a much more normal political party. I know it's being described as radicalized. There are still radical tones.
Yes.
But if you look at the internal structure of the AfD, there are networks. It's becoming imperfect, let's say, in its election processes. So it's becoming like any other political party, namely
Gunnar,
imperfectly democratic.
Gunnar, it is still extremely clearly popular. It's doubled its vote. But remember, it's not just one cordon sanitaire, it's double cordon sanitaires, because the likes of the far right here in France won't work with you either. So there is a distancing from even those on the far right. Gunnar, I'm going to move to hear from Alice Weidel. Have a good evening. You've said you're going to have restrained celebrations, but thank you for talking to us here on France 24.
My pleasure.